Okay. So I'd like to call the February 13th. Thank you. I'd like to call the February 13th Planning Board meeting to order. The first item would be to review or approve the meetings from the minutes from the last meeting. I did not get a chance to look at these at all. Yeah, sorry. So I don't know if anybody else had. We could take a couple of minutes and just look through it.
We have a choice, I guess, of tabling it or just, I did print out a copy.
Did you read them? I read it. Marcia read it. Looked good to me.
Okay.
I'll motion to approve.
All in favor? Very good. Old business, the update on the select board meeting.
Right, so the budget last night passed without any comment that we had, the budget that we submitted last month. Passed without any comment, so that we're going ahead with that. No, I don't have the agenda. What's next?
Yeah, I can actually, I've got it on my phone. So I guess we can move on to the new business, which is to start to discuss priorities for the planning board in the future.
There's the list there of the different priorities.
So do we want to I'm thinking that maybe we'll just kind of go through the concerned individuals and since we have John here too, if you have anything that you want to add, I don't know if you want to start first. Okay.
So I don't have a presentation, but I can provide context to some of the items on the agenda for ordinance work. So I had 4 listed top priorities. So the first on that list is solar farm standards. So this is something that was discussed a few years ago. And I put it on there to potentially revisit. So it would involve new submission requirements and performance standards in addition to what's required for site plan, but specifically for solar farms. Also probably new definitions as well. So this would be quite intensive work, or similar to the new standards for conservation subdivision. It would be probably the main priority item if it was chosen to go forward. The second item was the site plan review checklist. So there's currently an online checklist that's different to what's written in the ordinance. So part of this would be having something that's consistent in the ordinance and online, or either drafting a new checklist altogether. And then along with site plan, updating the process and procedures. So currently sections 802 to 804 are marked as reserved. So this would involve filling in those sections as well as adding a bit more context between sections 805 and 806. So there's not really any requirements for pre-application, sketch plan, and final. It's all kind of mixed together. And usually that's in regards to like number of copies, waiver requests, submission timeframes, and then site walks, and then public hearings. So that would be quite a bit of work as well. And then the last thing I had was definitions. So this involves mostly cleaning up definitions, and some definitions contain performance standards which need to get taken out because those don't belong in definitions. There also are some permitted uses under section 504 that don't contain definitions. And some of those include community buildings, public and semi-public uses, churches, drive-in theaters, and cemeteries. And then there are some that I listed that have performance standards. So manufactured housing, private road, corner lots are examples of other definitions that could be reworked.
For the solar farms, do you have any examples or sort of a template that you typically use from other rural towns? Just so we have a starting point to,
Yeah, we don't have a template, but we've worked with a number of towns on this, and generally I think I can give examples of what towns generally look for. So a lot of new requirements could include like solar panel specifications, having views analysis, additional buffering, and something along the lines of like decommissioning plans that when the solar finishes its lifetime, our proper revegetation measure is going to be taken. And a lot of the times they include like noise analysis of inverters, additional landscaping. So generally, things like that. But we can give examples from
I think having
other
a
towns.
best of compilation would be helpful. I mean, that's where we ended up with a conservation subdivision. We used that one you found as lifted a lot of that.
So could this be, just thinking about, the amount of work the planning board would have to do? Could this be more of a cut and paste sort of ordinance rather than writing one like we just went through? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think it could be more of providing samples of different towns and kind of take what you feel is most relevant. I don't know if it would be a major overhaul like the conservation draft was.
Yeah,
Do you know if there have been any solar farms that approached us since that last solar farm do we know? Anybody know?
I think that's died off overall. I mean, the financing rates, but
There are proposals in the wind. There are proposals in the wind within the data in Estabrook. So it's a great idea to get that. I might suggest that the planning board consider asking Northstar to include battery storage facility, some kind of regulatory ordinance, because that also would be the next kind of the next utility that comes. That's no starting to dealt with those facilities. But that's in the win. So.
Would we be looking at, I mean, after hearing you speak, it might make sense to me that we have potentially a zone that's near where there's actually, transmission capabilities. And if that's a zone that's developed near the TIF zone that is more friendly towards battery storage and solar panels, and then the rest of the town is under a different zone that's more, more aggressive regulatory towards panels, because if there's not really a place to connect them properly, from what I've heard, that's a problem. And, just building solar panels anywhere when there's not really a grid connection doesn't make sense.
We agree with the dollar will decide where utilities are built, and typically they're only going to be close enough to transmission corridors. So we find sense to one year. That's the road. Is a different type thing. But I would highly encourage the board to include North Stars creating one of those things that Jeff has got on.
So Sam, is that something that you could put together, an ordinance that we could review and then make changes to it that would be appropriate for the town.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. I think that would be
Yeah.
good, yeah.
I think we want to, I should mention that the town meeting is now June 17th. It's been bumped up a week to accommodate the FEMA deadline, but we should think about what can we get done by, well, backing up from the two public hearings. So what, I guess what would be maybe May-ish, or have to look at a calendar to say, but what can we get done by that time period in terms of the priorities? And of course, one would be the FEMA has to get done. And maybe we can talk through the other priorities, but not overwhelm
Right.
us or you or Tom in terms of getting things together.
Be important to go to the list.
Yeah.
Copy of this should be. This is time sensitive, and locally required, and where we can achieve it. And so that should be at the top. I can brief you on that.
Okay. The did have the checklist. That's something that we as the board could put together. I would think that that'd be or Tom, but I would think that getting that checklist done would be kind of important, as well as the review process for the new ordinance. I would think that would make sense to have.
Because that will be a whole new checklist.
Exactly. So it got the ordinance, but getting that buttoned up so that if somebody comes before us, we have all our ducks in a row. So I don't know how involved time-wise that would be, not having done that before.
On site plan review, I can tell you how long it would be in this collaborative effort with North Star and myself, or if it's delegated to either North Star or myself. If it's delegated to me, my current impression of the site plan review is that it has a very poor construct that needs a lot of work in order to be effective. And it's the cart and the horse concept. We really need to determine whether or not you want to, how far you want to go with site plan review, and the deficiencies that exist in it currently. And then you would be forming your checklist, because the current checklist has a goodly number of optional things on it that traditionally are requirements. So in order to have an effective checklist, you have to know what's required, what's waiverable, and what's optional, based on the review of the planning board. Needs a lot of work. It's one of your most critical pieces of machinery, if you will, because so many of the planning board reviews involve site plan review. And given the context of larger development on your doorsteps, site plan review is really critical to make it work to the town's advantage. And also to help the review process, because if there are too many requests for the things that aren't requirements, or too many waiverable items, it's going to make the review more difficult also. So I'm an advocate of detail, given that most of these would be larger scale projects, and it'll be helpful to the board to have a very definitive new site plan review. You can either attach what you have, or you can start somewhat fresh.
A question, and forgive my ignorance. When we add add things to the site plan review process, does that, if we alter that, is that something that needs to go before the town for a vote? Or are those the sorts of things that we can make changes to and not have to bring that before the town?
normally a legal interpretation of what is insignificant versus what is significant. So we can internally make that decision and collaborate. We can well agree that this is just a minor change. That's okay. My advice would be, just because of the society that we live in, that virtually everything we've got. I have to talk to John about this. This costs money, John, but these things are very delicate in society now. And I look at it as preventative medicine to make sure that everything works. The wheel turns, so to speak.
But it's not, I guess what I'm asking, does it need to go? Can we make these changes? In other words, if we're trying to prioritize things for the next 6 months as we come up to town meeting, what needs to get done before the town meeting? And what can we kind of work on to kind of button things up in regards to the ordinance that we just passed, that we can just kind of do on our own without having to go before the town?
If we can go through Jenny's bullet points, then we might want to circle back and then make that determination. Your priority.
Understood. I'm just, does anybody know if we make changes to the review process, does that need to go to a town vote? Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking that we should almost remove the checklist off the website because one is for a major subdivision. It isn't even for a conservation subdivision. The other is still not accurate. So I think they're posted on the website, right? They're the instructions for anyone who's going to apply. So we should take them off the website and then we can decide the order and timeline for, because I would think we'd have to finish the site plan review ordinance before we do the checklist. Isn't that what you're saying? Yes, yes. Yeah, okay.
Pretty hard to do checklist.
Right.
If there is to be substantive.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sam, for that. Jenny, do you want to go ahead next?
So definitely the definitions. Some of them aren't clear. There's also duplication where they kind of contradict each other. I would like to see something of a ordinance for the minimum, for the minimum house size instead of just the extent where it can be. A minimum would be nice. It once was in our ordinances and somehow got deleted or removed, but I couldn't find where it got removed in the town code. So I don't know if that was just oversight. And Airbnbs.
What do you have as far as the minimum square footage? Did you have something in mind and why?
650 square feet.
And where is that coming from?
That's coming from the previous ordinance.
Okay.
The figure I was looking for when I needed to find it. State of Maine considers a tiny home to be 400 square feet, and there are that codes for that. So anywhere 650 square feet. Same. I think they for an accessory dwelling at 750 square feet max. So.
We said it has to be 650. Does that mean that someone with a tiny home cannot, that's less than 650, they can't have a home that size, or that we're not taxing them as a home? Or
No, they tax them.
yeah, okay. I think that going with the state of Maine's minimum requirement of 400 feet makes sense. And give people the option, whatever size home you want. This is America. You have the freedom to have a small home if you want it. Why wouldn't we let people have small homes? What's the argument against small homes?
There are so many arguments against
Mhm.
that. Meetings for that.
Yeah.
It is whatever. not being able, not having occurrence to need to find it until this past year. Found out that back to historical minimum lot size, start there and work some kind of ordinance with the new kind of tiny house we're gonna exist, kind of like get, you know,
So the town's preference, the select board would prefer to have it at 650 feet.
Mobile home comes into play too, because I mean, that's a minimum of 750 square feet. I guess it's kind of from some of those other conversations is. I read in what the introduction to the planning board is that the mobile home ordinance came in the 70s. So it almost makes me think that was the 70s LD 2003, and that was the solution for affordable housing and cluster development back then. So is that even applicable today? And do we even want that? I mean, is that one solution here? Can we axe that ordinance as we try to kind of get our hands around these smaller ADUs, LD 2003 and other accessory units? Do we even,
so there will be conversations, but just trying to prioritize getting that minimum so that we have basis that talking about.
So
Yeah.
if it was in the ordinance prior and was not intentionally deleted, shouldn't that be easy just to put it back in?
We can't revise town.
Okay. Okay, understood.
We assume if it's not there.
Yep, okay.
So this is just, you're looking at like a cleanup thing, basically. So we can have a big, long discussion later, but you'd like to just add what was in there before back in. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
With Airbnbs, are we seeing that as a problem?
They fall under the accessory. You have contradictory definitions in our ordinances regarding accessory dwellings. So that needs to be-
I assume to have an accessory dwelling, you have to have a house, right? To have an accessory dwelling, you first have to have a house, or is that not clear?
The accessory dwelling is getting cleaned up as part of the LD 2003 work, which is in process already. Yes,
ordinance
yeah,
book, so there won't be definitions.
yes, that's right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, James. Short-term rental currently has 13 short-term rental on regular. Provided they pose some risk. So we're, first of all, would like to have some kind of regulatory process. Registered for that. Fire rescue. Fair minimum. Second of all, it may be fair for neighbors and just got to figure out how we're, and the rest of the day may involve that.
I did review, there are a couple jurisdictions that do have short-term rental rules. Some would call for registering, others just defined it, but didn't seem like, so it was in the ordinance and it was defined. But that's it. So
Yeah, I think how doctor. Home occupation.
So it's a bare minimum. Could that be just a robust definition that gets inserted, says, you know, any short-term rental
It's just a prioritized meeting. We're just trying to figure out what could pop up.
Yeah.
Something we need to think about.
I think in the midst of that, thinking about what people determine short-term rentals look like, whether it's a yurt or other types of housing. You know, it's kind of like if it's not there, I say really, it's challenging.
I see a need for a definition of all these sort of non-traditional housing that can be rented. I mean, I have an Airbnb, or we had an Airbnb, which is basically, part of our house. But then there's the yurts and there's the separate houses. And then there's no definition for campground, and yet we have a campground in town. And here we are getting an expansion of a campground. So it's sort of like okay, well, anyway, there's we're in almost reactive mode for these, because there's also a proposal for a set of cabins. Well, where does that fall under? If you're gonna rent, are these short-term rentals? And if there's a bunch of them, how do we need to create something that is broader than maybe what we're thinking about today, is what I'm saying.
That's why it seems like just getting the definitions right is an interim fix. Even if we don't have a full blown short-term rental ordinance, we at least have a solid definition that puts some parameters around it. And gives Ginny some guidance as to, something to point to and say, you're proposing to do this for a week, and we set it at 30 days, and we can only be in these types of structures. So it's a Band-Aid, but at least put something there. Give us longer term to put up.
Yeah, if we want, how we prioritize some of these things is how in-depth we're diving into it, if it's just a definition clarification on some of these things, then we can prioritize that. If it's a big, long discussion on what are Airbnbs, do we want Airbnbs, how do we want to properly regulate them, then would potentially be something that would not get prioritized before June.
Yeah, so I think personally, I would say we have a grab bag of stuff that falls into kind of that just broad definition area for cleanup. Just attack it at the start, and then we probably have 2 or 3 other things, and then just kind of circle back to broader ordinances like Airbnbs, short-term rentals, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, part of me is wondering how much of a role the planning board should have in all of this. I mean, are these decisions that the select board should be making about how the town wants to deal with these things? Or is this something that, and I'm just posing the question, there doesn't need to be an answer. It's just me thinking about looking at what the work that needs to be done and the work that we have to do on top of this, and what really should the role of the planning board be. I'm just throwing that out there into the environment.
Your role is here this checklist, deliberate, give feedback to what the board considers the highest priority. Because you are ones that are directly affected by lack of segment. So this process is just to give you an opportunity to weigh in what you want to do. Okay. I think select board will eventually plan, eventually decide, really appreciate have to implement stuff.
Okay.
That clarifies.
Yeah, totally. I appreciate that. Tom, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I think the perfect segue is to finish off on the talking. So I'm going to jump to bullet point 2 first. Not only is there need to recalibrate what those definitions are that are lacking, we have to recognize how comprehensive it is. The term Airbnb is used quite universally. Last count I had, there are 13 different hybrids of Airbnb. Some used for legal purposes, which you've read about in the last couple of months. And there's no way of monitoring them until, you know, somebody sniffs them out. They're under that big classification. And so I found at least 13 different variants of Airbnb. This whole notion of short-term rentals is a big project, and it needs to be tackled for a variety of different reasons. Some of them are those that are more well-established, like Airbnb. I believe they have to have a registry with the state revenue service. Some communities have actually decided that it was a revenue base in addition to the state. The state more and more will be becoming, and I've spoken to the state on this, they will become a lot more active with all of this type of activity, if you will. And it goes, and I've heard the terms yurts, cabins, and other things that fall into that category. There's another dozen other variants of that. One that is beginning to show up. They use containers. And there are very few ordinances that regulate that. They're being shipped over, they're being worked unfortunately into square footages to meet the bare minimum. And they're convertible, and they fall under the affordability of that. Next time you drive through Portland down Commercial Street, look at all the unskipped containers. Not suggesting unskip is selling it. Okay, they're quite an interesting business for Portland. It's a blessing for them. But there are other retired containers that are now conversion units for as living units. And once the town brings up a point that they tell you. So the past 3 marijuana operations covered in short-term rental. So it's a perfect cover for legal activity. So that's kind of where I use it from. It was going to go out of my head. When Tom says there are 13 variations of the business name, there are far more uses of legal entities. Sorry, back to the container. So, to kind of close this bullet point for the evening, definitions achieve one thing because it adds clarity so that when if someone is to do it legally, when they come in to see the code officer, then the code officer can say, aha, you fall into this slot. This is what you need to do. Definitions are only as good as definitions. The other flip side of that is the enforceability of those that don't meet the standard or inappropriate. There's a lot of deep thinking. This is a deep dive because it's a real big issue. It just hasn't surfaced yet. Cabin here and there, but it's very complex. And so I'll leave you with that. I'm going to jump back to bullet point 1 regarding aquifers. As I've said quite frequently, town's greatest asset is its water. That water may need to be analyzed from a planning perspective about your preservation first, because currently we're not being observed. I'll show you that on a plan, a map, so that you can better have that discussion. It's almost a discussion that should happen in a workshop meeting, or if you want to put it on your regular agenda. I'd like to at least acquaint you where I see some danger zones and red flags that we should be, cognizant of. So the key is, of course, gathering up what data we do have. We have a lot of metadata. I've done some plots, and so, the planning board and the select board need to think about, is there another layer of protection, of protecting our greatest natural resource in this community? Water is your greatest asset. And so, this is a job initially planners. I'm red flagging it and alerting you to it that, it might want to be one of your high priorities. Now, something simpler, easier, and achievable. I put down a food truck ordinance. Now people might Google and say, "Wow, what is that? I was going to box it down." It is so trending, and so I think reoccurring that, for example, if we, as a town, consider a farmer's market, that's sometimes where they first surface. And it's compatible at a farmer's market. I don't want to be kind of fair, but my biggest heart. Okay. And it has a bed. However, it needs some form of regulation. It's usually a temporary use, it's usually a seasonal use. That's an easy fix. I probably could write that on my way home tonight. But to have that as a part of your land use ordinance, I think is helpful. Again, we always have to be thinking about our code officer. When someone comes in and says, "I want to do a food truck and sell maple syrup," well, we really don't have anything that and it's more than trending. I think it because of the cost of setting up retail shops. Here's a couple good examples. Ghost Mountain bakeries. There once upon a time was 9, and now there's 6. Not that they're not making, not that they're not successful. It's just that retail costs, leasing costs are so high that it's time to pull it in a little bit. And as a result, we're seeing spinoffs in the planning world more food. May not seem like a high priority, probably not a real high priority, but we are, we being the economic development and sustainability committee, are looking towards trying to create, or at least test one fortunate great farmers in the area. We're exploring that concept, and I'd like to be thinking about what I call the piggyback vendors that sometimes with farmers markets.
Can I ask you a question? But so if there's a food truck at Bradbury, does it fall under our jurisdiction or does it fall under theirs?
Under the state jurisdiction, it's what would anyone would say when came and wanted to set up shop in the parking lot? So we
don't have any permitting.
If we did, would, because it's on state property, does it not apply to us?
Usually it applies to the business piece, sometimes when we have those. Usually they do it in the town that the food truck's going to be in. But we don't have any permits for that.
quick fix. We did have a permit. Anybody in the park. Maybe advantageous. Great one for the houses. Again, that's a quick fix. They come do it and they'll do it. And they'll do it. Next one, won't elaborate on this, but Greater Portland Cog, as part of plan effort for the town and for the economic development sustainability. That report is nearing its final stages. A component of that involves some rather significant zoning change recommendations. That probably won't be available for viewing for a while, but I just wanted to alert you that it's the opinion of POC that these changes are necessary in order to actually. So there's some pretty deep suggestions that require a lot of time and discussion, and it's not developed. The next one is procedural standards for performance bonding and escrow management. I think more and more we're going to get to that point in at some point I need to be briefed on how escrow management is handled currently, because it should be a very sophisticated approach. With flags letting us know we're in we have to drying up in the escrow. Given that there's apt to be larger subdivision in the future, this is a critical piece. I think I'm too new to know if there is a system in place, but it really needs to probably be looked at. It is a typical planning function, and it's important. The reason I say it's important is that one community I worked for in the past, when a recession came, it caused a lot of complications, infrastructure, and incomplete subdivision. And when banks went south, the FDIC was looking, and everybody was shrugging their shoulders what we next. So it's best to be prepared. And I just wanted to call that out. FEMA, Marcia brought up some of the details of it. We're making progress on it. It was recently brought to my attention that there's some more tweaking that's being done. Easy enough. I'm still quite concerned that there is no mapping at this point in time. I've called that to the attention and the feds, saying, you know, even though we're going to proceed ahead for the town meeting, municipalities have to put a little pressure on these agencies to produce what is the vital component to the ordinance. They go hand in hand. So the good news is that it's moved from, I really don't know when the maps will be ready, to a review stage, and I suspect that a pending stage is where we're at right now. Maps are pending, would be a lot of fair folks that take a look at it before it gets to the state. I'm going to, on a weekly basis, keep checking on those maps, and once we get the maps, then we should be pretty good to go. I also will be working with Marcia to make sure that the board has adequate time to take a look at it. The language in it, a lot of boilerplate stuff, not to worry about wordsmithing, too much in it. It's written by about 20 Chicago attorneys. It's in pretty good shape, but we need to personalize it a little bit. Just a couple little tweaks, some things I need to talk about, and then bring it to the planning board. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm hoping that the maps will come because it's going to make us all happy. It's our happiness. On the site plan review, we've talked about it a lot this evening. I definitely feel it needs a lot more strengthening. In order to facilitate it properly, as your internal planner, we need detail, we need definitiveness. And when it's definitive, then we can make it work. If there's too many gray areas in there, it makes more of a challenge for all of us. Same thing for the checklist. Fee schedule in progress with the select board. I suspect in a couple weeks we'll talk about it in the peer review. I think we need to open that conversation as to when we want peer review. There, for example, if there was a proposal for a large battery facility somewhere along the transmission corridor, I'm comfortable in reviewing it because I used to work for the Edison company and we handled all those kind of things. So that's not a very difficult review. They overcomplicate it. It's not a difficult review, but it does need better site plan review standards to effectuate that and turn out the best possible plan. LG 2003, I believe Sam created a memorandum. When was that, Sam? Do you recall?
It was at least a few months ago. Yeah.
Urge the planning board to take another look at it. There are issues that will surface this year surrounding affordability, housing, in different types of housing. So, and I suspect there's changes coming down from the state. Many municipalities address it beyond Sam's memorandum to actually having an ordinance that speaks to all that issues. So that may be a next step. It's a moving target, but it's something that we need to be very cautious. Protect the character. And yet still provides some sort of affordability.
Sam, did you send that to us or did you send it to Tom?
I believe I sent it to Tom and copied Matt, but I can send it to and circulate it.
My but my list is not complete, but those are the ones that kind of came from the applicant. And if the planning board can digest all three of our submittals, we see some commonality there, and we can begin to tackle. There's a couple that are pretty simple that are going to help this office later on.
I do appreciate everybody taking the time to help. I think it's important to have everybody get involved on what we should be doing next. Just looking over everything, and I'd be happy to hear after listening to everybody, and of course, anybody else jump in, but it would seem to me that FEMA would take priority above everything. But I don't know how much the planning board would be involved in that process. So how much time would it take for us? Like how much of a project would it be on our end as we kind of look through this list?
If you were to see the documents in advance, to be able to do it in the meeting, because it's more of a function.
Right.
The key. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. What I think the select board would like is the planning board prioritize that from your perspective.
Right.
Give that list to the select board so we can agree or disagree and we fund that. So how much goes to we need some feedback here as soon as you can. To the budget.
Right, what I'm actually thinking, my thought right now, and I'm sorry, I wasn't planning on running this meeting, so I hadn't, given. But what because a lot of this is new information to us, I think it's helpful for us as a board to kind of quickly walk through what we think is a priority, because we have the people here that have the information. So I think we can maybe quickly just kind of run through something, and then we can talk as a board and see what we really want to tackle, is kind of my thought at this moment.
But we understand that you ultimately choose our priorities but we're just giving you recommendations.
We're not gonna choose, we're gonna take your recommendation. That's our job.
Yeah.
to see what you, our priority is to fund them. So, more important, from my perspective, here today.
Right. But it would seem like the FEMA thing like has to happen. So that's up there, but
I've gotta go, because I got school board. So you'll coordinate. with Tom.
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Tom.
I think from the planning board perspective, I think cleaning up the last remaining bits for the conservation subdivision would seem important to me, and maybe even get that to town meeting. So the review process and procedures. Because
The site review process, they were
site review
highly, yeah.
process, then we come up with the checklist.
Yeah.
And then that thing is kind of put to bed.
Sounded like that was a big task to go through the site plan.
You can do it one of two ways. You can, do a complete overhaul. Or you can patch up, broken pieces and make it more functional, particularly with the conservation side. It's my anticipation that you'll be seeing, hopefully, a conservation subdivision here.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we've got it nice and stuff, so that we're prepared to do the best possible job.
Well, it sounds like you have an idea of what's broken, and you also potentially have an idea of how it should be completely overhauled. So really, my thought is just time, right? What can we actually accomplish for June? If you if you're kind of the town planner and you are, I think of you as kind of the lead of the site review process, right? And so if you have an idea and you want to write something up saying this is the dramatic rewrite or this is a minor rewrite, either one, and I don't know how long that'll take for you. Maybe it's by the next meeting you have something written up and we could look at it and say, this seems aligned with what we intended, and we could pass it right away, or we might fall into a longer discussion. I don't know at this point, really, but
I'd like to suggest as a two-step process. Initially send to you some of the key bullet points of areas and what some of the remedies are. And then
Yeah.
Step two would be the actual construct of it in the proper language, the proper words.
Yeah.
But first, conceptually, if the board is supportive of these changes and how they function in the site plan review, then as soon as I get your blessing on that,
Yeah.
I will proceed to put it in the proper language.
Yeah.
And then you look at the proper language and you may want to wordsmith.
Yeah.
Or you may not.
no, that makes sense to me. I mean, my big picture when I think about June is there's two buckets, right? There's the bucket of we want to be in compliance with state and federal regulations and funding. And some of that is the FEMA thing, and some of that may be kind of the LD 2003 piece. And the other bucket is stuff that relates to immediate public health and safety, which is some of the definition stuff you were saying. And it could be touching upon something like the short-term rentals, not necessarily a big deep dive into them, you know, of arguing about, do we want them in the town, but potentially a light touch on them, just saying for public health and safety, we would like to have define this and have a registry to at least know what's going on. You know, that might be something we could do by June. If I'd look at you guys as the people who really know what needs to be done. But like, and then, so those are kind of the two big buckets. And then there's the third piece of, is there something else that's connected to that, that's more in depth, that we think we can potentially tackle or begin the process of tackling? And that could be kind of this whole Pandora's box of the, you know, what is kind of affordable housing and LD 2003 and these definitions of containers. Or it could be, as you say, you know, you're interested in doing a presentation on the aquifers. Obviously, if we're building and there is actually if there's data that says the aquifer really needs to be looked at, and we need to look at that right away, then, you know, obviously you want to do that before you build a ton of houses. So that could be a potential priority.
I just
I'm-
want to add,
yeah.
I had a long conversation about 2 years ago with the state geologist, and even though 2 of our 3 aquifers are being withdrawn by towns outside of us, he seemed to think that our aquifers were not in danger of, even with, you know, a 10% growth, which is what was predicted at the time. So it's important. Is it urgent?
Well, that's what, I mean, I remembered what you said, and that's why when he said he has some concerns, I'm interested to hear, well, how does that jive with the data that you got?
I normally don't debate planning board members, but I love on that and geologists. All the signs are there. We'll be able to prove more of this data. We're working through megadata right now. A lot of assumptions, because there is. We're off the hopes that we're going to do a fairly detailed water capacity analysis. So the proof in the pudding will be when that analysis is done, if we hopefully can get funding for it. That's all in progress at this as we speak. I'm hoping, I'm optimistic. I hope something comes of it where we can do those exploratories, because that will help us. It's everybody's best guess at this point. That's one of the most tricky things to work with in planning, is the preservation of water supplies. You know, it's interesting. Most people have their own well. They're getting, you know, 18 ppm. They're happy. People take showers and everybody's happy. But if we look at the big picture of one, fire suppression, 2, if there is intent to build properly a village, it's going to require more water.
Yeah.
Our water lines that are being serviced by the association are 2 inches and 3-inch pipes that were laid 32 years ago.
Where is that?
Of the water supply, the public.
Just
water
right
supply,
here.
right
Yeah.
here. And so, I'd rather be error on the side of we've got plenty of water, but investigate what is out there so that we can reaffirm what Marcia has said.
I think that's a good idea. I don't think that, and I'd definitely be interested in spending time on that, but it's, when I look at a priority, you know, when we approve these subdivisions, we do get I mean, that's the question that we ask, is there enough water for this subdivision? We have somebody come in and they say, sure, yeah, there's a ton of water. So if we have, if we're being told something that may be incorrect, that's something that we need to hear for sure, but it doesn't, we could definitely spend time on that, but if we can show that this subdivision cannot be built in this place because of a water problem, then that's,
We might be able to achieve this just by some things.
Yeah.
That quantity briefing, the planner, here's the status, here's what has been further investigated, here's where we believe all the resources are, and here's what we know is being extracted.
Yeah.
In all three of this.
Well, I mean, yeah, if we can get federal or state dollars to collect more data, I'm all for that. But as Todd said, in a way, like, it doesn't necessarily sound like it's a big burden on us as a planning board right away. Like, great, if you want to pursue this to get data, more data is always great. But if we're looking at our schedule, it's not necessarily something that's using a lot of time on our schedule unless we end up getting money and doing a survey and collecting the data, and then we can spend time reviewing it.
What we found, here's what we researched, and if there's anything that pops up as a red flag that happens to coincide with subdivisions going on or commercial project, then we can. Just wanted to let you know that we're on top of it. We hope that we might get some resource money to do a.
yeah, I like the idea of an occasional memo. And then if we need to have a conversation at a meeting, I think that's a really good idea.
Exactly what I said. Wanted for your agenda, but at the same time, want to keep you informed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like this whole village district plan is going to require a lot of ordinance revision, and that aquifer actually isn't part of our aquifer map. And that's where the public water, our Pownell public water comes into play. I mean, that's going to feed right into that whole larger discussion about the village district, which is something we won't be doing before the next town meeting, but I think long-term, we're going to grapple with that once the report comes out.
What's the timeline on this kind of TIF district piece? Do you know that? Like,
There is a TIF district that is, on the retirement line.
Yeah.
With Estabrook.
Yeah.
However, there is another TIF district that was supposed to have been, part of that whole package. That is almost an overlay portion of the village district. However, when we reviewed the checklist for that type of district, much of the work had not been done. And so there's probably a year to a year and a half's worth of work to fulfill all of the checklist requirements for a village, commonly referred to the downtown. State calls it a downtown, but in our case, I would envision it.
well, what about the North Yarmouth mini TIF over there? This kind of ties into this whole solar and battery piece, of if we're making a little bit of an industrial or energy or business zone in that little piece, are there stuff that the planning board is going to need or should look at around, stuff that comes up with that?
Well, it would be a change of plan if they were to add in those types of structures in
Yeah.
Which I think, would require certainly the main DEP to think about it. So part of the, visual improvements would have to be revisited. Because of the scale. Site location that I think it might, depending on the scale, might trigger, both the state and. But much of this, just to, inform the board, is just in the talking stage. So, there's no plans on it. But we're kind of, that's part of what we do as kind of a, we're supposed to be anticipatory of things that might come up.
Sam, are we like waiting from the state on some of this LD 2003 stuff? Or do we have what we need for that stuff? Are we all?
Everything's all set. We're not waiting on the state. It's really just, I mean, I can send out the memo that I sent to Tom, but it's mostly just cleaning up definitions.
But there is a big discussion. It sounds like there's potentially a big discussion about ADUs and affordable housing and definitions, like some towns are doing more with the ADU piece and other towns are doing less. And do folks see that kind of discussion as the next logical extension of us to tackle? And now that we've gotten the subdivision piece out of it, I mean,
Yeah, I think small structures in general are a top priority, just cleaning up the definitions, boxing that in and figuring out what we want. It ties into LD 2003. And indirectly the aquifers. I mean, it's limiting development. That's the back door to have a lot of small structures that are gonna be connected to water and have toilets and potentially new wells. So I think you've got to set the subdivision, but now if you can double everything within there and then start adding all these small structures as well, that can lead to a lot of development. So I think just that probably fits within the definition bucket, but I think that should be a core focus of the definitions is getting that.
do we think we could? Yeah, I mean, so yeah, does that make sense to, as that are being our next focus is these ADU small structure piece, and then we can see what,
Yeah, I think it's like the site plan review. I think it'd be helpful
Yeah.
to see from Sam, Judy and Tom, just your list of definitions and especially thoughts around LD 2003 and small structures as part of that.
Right.
Just so we have something to start with as a baseline and then work through that.
I mean, that sounds like plenty of work. If we have these definitions we're working on, the site plan review we're working on, and the small structure and definition stuff we're working on.
But if we're
That's
just
plenty
reviewing
of
something
work.
that's been
Yeah.
keyed up for us, I think that's easier and helps streamline it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of, my list is, the title of my list is prioritizing our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, Sam, that you'll be dealing with the cleanup of the definitions and then we can just more or less review that when that's cleaned up, or is that something that we'll need to spend a fair amount of time on?
Well, if it's just, like cleaning up and clarifying definitions, that's probably not gonna take so much time, but if it includes like adding a lot of new definitions, that probably will include
Right.
planning board.
So Brian, Ryan, getting back to the points that you were making, are you thinking about adding new definitions, minimum house size?
I think it's a two-step process. I think we tee up the definitions we have, Sam, like with suggested edits, and then have a list of new definitions that Sam, Judy, and Tom will have and see what it is, and then just triage it.
That sounds good.
I think, that's kind of, it's sort of the priority, but the two column, what can we handle? What can
Right.
we outsource? So anything I think where it can be,
But I do think that in this area, I could see it leading to more planning. There's the definitions piece, which we can do quickly, but that potentially leads to a larger conversation similar to what we had with the conservation subdivision of, as we look at kind of ADUs and smaller house sizes and, what fits into the comprehensive plan piece of wanting housing affordability and how does that balance with preserving rural character and, you know, I think that could potentially take time of planning board to talk about. We'll get these definitions and there'll be fast stuff that we can say, yes, yes, yes. But then there is potentially a larger conversation of how does some of the, if we want to dive beyond the definition and think about how it actually applies to specific situations, if subdivisions don't have ADUs, then that makes it easier, but just like how, yeah, that
I think step
interplay
one is
that
just
we,
get it out there so we have
Yeah.
it for June.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of have a list of stuff we want to go back to, but I think we have to just contain ourselves a little bit and say, all right,
Yeah.
we're only gonna spend this much time on a single definition. What can we minimally accept for now? It can always be edited, amended and.
That's exactly the way I'm kind of thinking about it. Priorities for June. If we want to get into a longer discussions about other definitions, we can always tackle that and add definitions to the ordinance after June if we needed to.
Yeah, we may not get it perfect, but it's better to have something than
Yeah.
nothing.
I think
yeah,
I-
well, then it's like, I think it's worth, I mean, you can kind of identify, these are the bare minimum things we need to do. And these are the potential hairier items or longer discussion items and even say like, this is what we could pass for now. But like, we may want to circle back.
Like
Or-
for rentals, for
yeah,
example.
yeah,
We're not gonna
exactly.
Write a whole ordinance on it, but if we can at least get a solid paragraph that helps address it.
And so that's kind of the way I'm looking at this list. So I've kind of starred the items that would require ordinances to be written and put before the town. So again, the FEMA, I've got definitions and then site plan review process. And the checklist doesn't really need to go before the town, but the process procedure would need to be done first and go before the town. I think it would be reasonable to get perhaps that stuff done for June.
Yeah,
The solar farm should be pretty easy too. And it sounds like there may be some push by the select board to try and get something out for that.
I don't know if the solar farm will be easy, but we might be able to do
That's
it.
something, kind of maybe below what you just said, just in the
Yeah, that's
background, if
right.
that's, if
So-
Stan, if you have time, just cut and paste and kind of,
Yeah.
here's the suggested rough and, highlight areas we need to set density or, number of solar panels, height of solar panels, that kind of stuff. But we've got the blocking and tackling.
I think it's, yeah, we could look at what other towns are doing and then we kind of got to decide. What I was saying is like, if we're doing a growth TIF zone that's industrial, commercial, like John said, on the North Yarmouth town line, maybe there's different kind of solar panel regulations there, but if you're doing the middle of a farm in a field in the middle of Pownell, people might be more annoyed by that and want, more strict regulations in a different zone.
We're limited here we've got single phase power, so you can't go that big.
Most of it's rudimentary. The key points are decommissioning. They do have life expectancy and rehabilitation of the site when there is no more solar farm.
Yeah.
On that site.
Right.
It's almost perhaps even more challenging than.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very complex process. We've already seen it in talking with different planning colleagues. It's just.
Yeah.
They're bewildered about the complexity of, when you've done all this.
Well, the
They
piece
have
that,
life expectancies and there's failures in the system. Same thing with battery containment.
Yeah.
It has life expectancy, the way that they're stored, the aesthetics, the overall aesthetics are really critical.
yeah,
So if I can move back to the site plan review, thinking, here is, February 14th is tomorrow. I think that on site plan review, the best thing to do is to look at the critical areas that need some remedies or suggestions. Try to fix some of the pieces rather than to attempt. I don't think we have enough time to achieve major overhaul. So let's take the ones that need to be fixed, particularly for, I keep thinking about the conservation subdivision. I want that first conservation subdivision to be something that we all can be very proud of, a state model. And so we can really tweaking the site plan review.
Right, yeah, for sure.
Is that okay to just? fix
Yeah.
a portion of
Yeah,
it?
because I thought the deep dive would be too time consuming to accomplish. Yeah, that's a good idea, I think.
What? That date is to get things to the select board. I don't know if they have their timelines established for the June 17th meeting. So if we back it up.
2 weeks of public hearings and then there's also reading.
I'm sorry, I didn't. So there's 2 public hearings, 2 weeks before which in advance, and then before that, the select board sets the warrant for the public hearings. It's almost 16. It's not just something along those lines. I mean, we're talking about.
Our April meeting, real, I mean, minimally, it's for safety.
I think if our calculations are right, everything that you need to do needs to be done by May or your third week.
So I mean, but that gives, you were saying you wanted to come with us with some ideas, right? So in March, you'd come with us with a bunch of ideas and kind of bullet points saying, this is the direction I want to go. We would say yes, no, yes, yes, yes. And then April, you'd come back with language written up and we'd review it and potentially tweak it a little bit. And then, so it's like, really, yeah, what can you accomplish in 1 month? Or in 1 or 2 months and
Same thing
bring
with
to us?
definitions.
Yeah.
Same
Maybe
thing in
the
March.
FEMA draft FEMA ordinance could probably be drafted for the FEMA ordinance could probably be drafted by the next meeting.
I think we can.
And that would take care of
we
that.
don't have the
Maps.
So I feel a little bit better because it's an appending file now. But pending in these days. Decide what that means.
Yeah, so I think that's, oh, go ahead, Marcia.
And at that meeting, maybe you could also talk about the broken bits of site plan and we could have a discussion about that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. So that'll go on the list for the to-do list for next meeting. But just kind of to continue to work through this list. So things that would require, without getting, I don't want to get into like the details of what is involved in each ordinance. I just want to, like, I'm just laying out that these are ordinances that are going to have to go before town meeting. And what do we want to deal with now and what do we want to deal with later? I think we've kind of set that priority. The solar farm is maybe something we could do, maybe not, but I think the other 3 items we should try and get done for June. Is that reasonable?
The 3 of them being the definitions, FEMA, and site plan.
Site plan
Yeah.
review process.
Yeah.
And then everything else would be gravy. And we can continue to look at these other items like the food truck ordinance and campgrounds, and we can continue to look at those as time goes on and maybe get that out
Yeah.
for the following year.
Yeah.
If we felt like it. So I would just put all those other ordinances kind of in the bucket that it doesn't really matter as far as priorities. They would
Maybe it
go
was solar at the top.
solar at the top.
Yeah, and then-
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. That's kind of just below the
Yeah.
first 3. With maybe minimum footage of a house could kind of go in that. And then everything else, without like saying this is number 5 and 10 and whatever. They're just kind of below that.
I mean,
We want to plug in the old minimum house size and then discuss it after.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's why, yeah,
Part of definitions.
Ginny, if you want to find the spot where you think the 650 minimum lot house size goes in and, you know, present that at the next meeting, we can say, okay, and-
Where it goes in the definition.
or just, well, is it just in the definitions that it needs to go, or does it need to go anywhere else?
Yeah,
We have
Okay.
it somewhere else.
that'd be great. And then if you could just bring it to
And then-
the March meeting, we could probably check that off the list.
And then-
Easy fixes are things you don't.
Well, I was just thinking, the whole thing with the solar farms, there's two issues to me besides what you said. One is if you're taking, it all depends on how they build it, right? If they're taking 100 acres, like, hey, what's the size of, that we're allowing? And they're building a big fence around it. And then that's disrupting animal flow patterns and wildlife and all this stuff, that's a no-no. You know, if they could take a field, right, that was a farming field, and they could put solar panels on it and not put a fence around it, and they could even potentially farm under it, then I'd be like, oh, that's a multi-use thing, and that's, so it's like, is it even possible to have an ordinance that basically goes to that level, basically saying, we don't want a solar farm that has a dramatic impact. If you can marry a solar farm into like what we already have, instead of just clear cutting 100 acres of forest and putting a giant fence up, we don't want that, you know?
Unfortunately, there seems to be a lack of discretion in building farms.
Yeah.
No such thing as deer corridors or salamander corridors. It's a clear cut.
Yeah. Well,
And, I'll show you some horrific, within 50 miles
Yeah.
of here, we're over 1,000 acres.
well, then I would say,
Totally clear cut.
I would think people in Pownell, if that's the only way you can build solar farms, most people would be opposed to it.
Staff working under.
Yeah.
construct with this, we have to deal with scale and scope.
Yeah,
And there might be a way of building some environmental standards into it. But again, the decommissioning.
Yeah.
and Life expectancy is a really critical piece that, most communities in America have not thought about.
I think that's
Make-
boilerplate when we get to the ordinance, sorry, Marcia. But I mean, I think even that could fall under definitions where we can just have some generic definition of a solar farm does not exceed X number of acres, must have a decommissioning plan. Is only allowed in XYZ zones, or something like that, and then.
Yeah.
Throw solar farm and site plan review where. It's something that has to get reviewed underneath that, but at least we've got some box around it.
Could you do that? Just put that kind of language in a definition?
So.
Yeah, I mean, it would require a new definition and then you'd have to decide where it's permitted, what zones, and then performance standards.
Yeah.
So either that could go in section 600 or under site plan.
Okay.
Do we have to go to that level of detail of performance standards? I mean, could it just fall under general performance standards for now, or are there state level performance standards that we could just reference? Just as a fix, or there's something versus now where it's wide open?
I mean, usually most towns that we work with do have performance standards and do go to that level.
I think the idea is we'd want to get there, but if for June, if we just want to have something, so we've got some way to moderately control it.
I mean, I think a start would be like at least having definitions for them and having it, deciding where they're permitted.
And all that could just be listed in a definition, right? I mean, even if it's a page definition, it's something that gets us there for now.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Not
there's-
ideal, but
yeah.
it's something.
well, if we were really worried that someone's gonna clear cut 100 acres, could just
Solar farm can't.
Just
be
say,
more than
just
5
say they
acres.
can't be,
Yeah,
or
Simple
make
as
the
that.
definition so restrictive that they're not really gonna be built at this point, and then we can go back and look at it.
That's why they make the words not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
So Maine Audubon has some really good recommendations about solar farms that we could incorporate. Like you were talking about the fences, they have fences.
I'd be
that are-
interested to see
have
that,
enough room for the wildlife to go.
what their
through.
recommendations are.
Yeah,
One thing I skipped over, I just want to go back to quickly. LD 2003. Is there something that we need to do for that? Or is the legislature still trying to sort out the rules?
There's nothing the board needs to do. for
Okay.
that.
Okay, so other than just keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we've already, addressed or worked to address those changes.
Okay,
Can they, yeah, are ADUs allowed in conservation subdivisions? They are.
Say they were, yeah.
Well, but then there's the other piece where you have to have like lot size setback requirements and water and septic. So I'm saying if someone had a half acre lot size, really, could they put an ADU in it? Most of would they still be able to put an ADU in if they just had a half acre lot size, basically? Is there really enough room for them to do it, or septic or whatever? I mean,
Depends on the design.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it could be above a garage, yeah.
Well, the ADU can be bigger than the house. They pick 650, right? So.
No, accessory dwellings,
Well,
Well, 750 versus 650, right?
no, this is in the definition that states something about.
Oh, okay, so that's the.
Yes, it was the minimum I could.
so I think we kind of have this list sorted
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Okay. So we can move on to the last couple items. I've got the welcome to the planning board.
that's supposed to. Find version of planning board procedures.
Okay,
Welcome to planning board. Maybe I'll just.
put it on the next meeting. Okay. Yep. And then the Bradbury Mountain Campground.
We were going to discuss and now that there are two zones. And so it really should never have come to us.
Okay,
So that's why it's going to the board.
okay.
For change of use.
The right
Administrative appeal. That's right. Administrative appeal, it's not an expansion of Bradbury. Very important.
Oh, that's
Very
why
important.
this was,
I mean,
that's why it was not appropriate to explain.
expansion is never mentioned. Okay, this is an administrative appeal, hugely different than any other appeal. The applicant is processing this before you see as an administrative appeal. Be no further discussion about any other kind of appeal, because it isn't any other kind of appeal, because it's being processed.
So that means we're not involved. Okay,
Unless the ZBA renders a decision, they can involve staff or any other boards. But I think the proper thing to do, and I'm not discussing directly for the record, is to await the outcome of the 29. And then that'll tell us what the next steps are for the applicant. So depending on the outcome, tell us what we can do, including myself. Okay. The reason we came to the planning board in February is that applicant misunderstood the process. And as a result of that, it changed the complexion of the middle here to do our stack function. It's requested, there is no appeal. But the request is needed prior to.
Yeah, got it.
Yes, that's what I was.
Um,
I've been in communication with a gentleman by the name of Sam Weiss, fantastic utility man. We're going through all the details, but the plans have not been submitted. It's actually preparing a huge manual. Again, it's more of a functionary type thing. It's almost all maintenance and some airfield activity. So again, it's almost perfunctory, but it's always good to that he's prepared and ready once he gets some of the plans. As is always the case of these big utility companies, they start starting out activity. He's hopes to his last communication to me was that he hoped, this being Mr. Rice, he hoped to have submitted with proper fee payment and plans by the top of March. If it's into your guidelines, then it will be on your agenda for the third week. If we get it later. But again, it looks like most skimming.
They're not cutting a new corridor. This is just, they're not cutting a new corridor. This is just maintenance on an existing thing. Okay,
It was fun and simple.
good.
Something that I added to the agenda. I have to do a submittal for the town newsletter that covers April. And I don't know whether it's appropriate to mention these specific projects that we'll be working on or just not mention.
The most appropriate thing to always do is unless we have an official submittal that has landed in our offices that we have brought to you, it is probably inappropriate. I'd say it's better to err on this letter. With all the things that are going to happen in the future and all societal things, I think it's better to do everything in its own little order.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not presenting, or Mr. Rice is not presenting, because it's not in order.
So Marcia, though, you could potentially highlight that we plan on working on site plan reviews and definitions and FEMA map, basically, right? Since that's what we agreed in this meeting, we wanted to focus on.
Yep, so far reads with a successful passage of the new conservation subdivision ordinance. Planning board is turning its attention to upcoming projects and ordinance review. Working closely with our town planner and CEO in finalizing the priorities for ordinance revision worked on in between project review. And then I can just add a sentence about those. And then I did also add a sentence about this Vision Zero Action Plan, which is GPCOG, trying to reduce traffic fatalities and injuries. To have them put the survey up on the website so that
Great.
you can actually go up the survey, especially when you see a near accident, you can pinpoint the location. So I just added a paragraph about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll take care of the other.
so,
And then the annual report is to the
okay. So that'll have to be on the agenda for next month. Okay. Which I guess we can go ahead and talk about. If there was nothing else, we can talk about the agenda.
Yeah.
So, would, Sam, would you have definitions for us to look at by next month?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we put that on?
We have the FEMA.
How about, yes, why don't we put it on there, because, you know, everything's gonna sneak up on us mid-April. I think we should be, we've had a couple recent changes, but this goes up.
I'm going to be out of the country until right before the meeting, so the agenda, unless I delegate it, will probably come out
Okay.
on Monday.
I can type it up.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right, that'd be great.
And then I just don't know how to, would I just send it through my email?
So I sent it to Matt to review,
Okay, yep.
and then I sent it to Becky, and she posts it.
All
And I
right,
also, and then I guess Sam or anybody else, if there's other inclusions, that's the other thing is, like, for example, we'll be getting probably something from both of you guys.
Yeah.
So if it's available to send, and you may have to ask, I think Matt can see the planning board,
yes, I can.
and you can, yeah. I could tell you the password. Actually, it's one of those things where I click on it and I never know what it is. It just opens up, so.
Not wanting to put too much on our plate for the next meeting, should we start to look at the site plan review process? That would be three things, the broken bits. If we have a little something to look at, we could start to chew on it. Yeah.
So. you
Why
know,
don't-
Take some of the areas that would be most crucial.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, right. Sam, if you have thoughts on that as well, if you want to bring that in. Jenny, if you want to bring the minimum footage of a house info, that shouldn't take too much time either. All right, I move, well, I'll say congratulations to everybody on a job well done, getting the ordinance passed. That felt pretty good, I have to say. And thank you, Sam, for all of your hard work on that. Really appreciate it. I hope it does what we want it to do. That said, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?